What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another weekly updates. There's lots of exciting news to go over here this week, as well as some controversial stuff to go over here this week in the updates. So the first news story is probably going to be one of those controversial ones. So Acura this week has revealed the production version of the Acura Integra here, a 2023 model Acura Integra. And so we finally have all the details on it as well, except for exact pricing. We do have a good idea of pricing at least. So first, visually, like we expected, it looks just like the prototype that we saw a few months ago. As far as the mechanical details go though, only those who kept their expectations conservative will be happy here. So it runs the same 1.5 liter turbo 4 from the Civic Si and does the same exact 200 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque. Now, this is most likely underrated, just like the Civic Si is, and realistically might be doing closer to 230 horsepower at the crank, but still it's a bummer it doesn't get at least even a little bit more power than the Civic Si, but it's just a direct port over here. And so there's some other hits here as well though. So on top of that, another bummer is that the standard transmission is a CVT, and you can get the manual, thankfully. That had already been promised, but unfortunately that manual is only available in the top A-Spec Tech package. So they're playing the Mazda game here of only giving you the manual with a very top fully loaded trim. Acura seems to think that people who want the manual want every bell and whistle. I think they should give people the choice, but anyway, that is the way they're deciding to do it here. So also, another thing that it shares with the Civic Si is it does get the limited slip diff, but only with that manual as well. So only, again, in that top trim do you get the limited slip diff. So otherwise, you will have the Si powertrain, but with a CVT and no limited slip diff in those lower trims. So there's that. One advantage though that it does have over the Si is that it gets the 3-mode adaptive dampers in, again, only that top A-Spec trim. I'm not sure, it's so, I guess they're just going to have the regular Integras for people who don't care about performance, but it's just crazy how if you want any of the performance goodies, you got to go up to this top trim. But anyway, so it has the adaptive dampers, which is good news considering there aren't any adaptive dampers anymore in the new Si, so great to have that here. All Integras will be getting a few drive modes as well, but only the top trim gives you an individual mode to custom tailor the different parameters. It also gets a similar exhaust setup to the Si with what Acura calls a coil type exhaust, which loops around towards the end to give it a little bit of a cooler sound. Inside it shares a lot with the Civic, but does get a slightly different dash design, but otherwise it retains the same HVAC controls, same steering wheel, screen, center console area, all that is the same as the Civic. And surprisingly though, on top of that, even though this is a luxury branded kind of vehicle, the Integra will still come with the base Civic's 7-inch touchscreen as standard. And again, the only way that you even get the 9-inch screen that you get on upper trims of the Civic and even on the Si, that's standard on the Si, this 9-inch screen, you only get this 9-inch screen on the top tech package here of the Integra. So, and that also, that 9-inch screen is the only one that gets wireless smartphone integration, so you still got to plug your phone in on the lower screen as well. The menus have been redone a little bit to have the Acura fonts and logos and stuff, so that's nice. And you also do get other nice upgrades here. So you get a 10.2-inch digital gauge cluster as standard, and that is something that you don't get fully digital gauges in a Civic Si. It's only partially digital, but the digital gauges are something you can get in other Civics. So nice that you have those here. Also, heated seats are also standard, which is a nice upgrade over the Si, which doesn't have them anymore. The technology package also adds a head-up display, a 16-speaker ELS 3D stereo, which even has speakers mounted on the roof. There's a 12-way power driver seat with memory, a 4-way power passenger seat, ambient lighting, and a few other things. And so now it makes sense, as far as everyone's like, why did they get rid of the adaptive dampers in the Civic Si? Why did they get rid of heated seats in the Civic Si? Well, here's your answer. I think they kind of wanted to make even a little bit more space between this and the Integra, because if, comparing this Integra to the old Civic Si, it's just the luxury stuff, and that's basically it, and the hatch. But those are really the only two things. So I think, decontenting the Si made a little bit more room to make the Integra a little more appealing to those who do want all those features. So, yeah, it's interesting. So it's going to be starting around $30,000, and that's all they've given us so far, which makes me worried about the upper end of the spectrum. But according to Redline Reviews, they were at the reveal, and they're reporting that the top A-Spec tech trim should be topping out around $35,000. If they truly do keep it right, around 35 grand and don't go beyond that, I could still see this holding some appeal for some people because, so basically you're looking at about a $6,500 upcharge roughly over an SI. And $6,500 extra, you get adaptive dampers, the hatchback, heated memory seats with more adjustments, and synthetic leather instead of the cloth you get in the SI. You get fully digital gauges. You get a better stereo, even though the SI still was a Bose stereo, not a bad stereo. It was actually very good. But this one should be, a little bit better. But, so if you want a loaded SI hatch and you're willing to pay, $6 or $7 more for that, here you go. But I think that, aside from that demographic, it's going to be an uphill battle, I think, with this Integra. I think, we'll see, how the non-enthusiast crowd reacts to it, as far as, the value proposition and stuff there. And, there are some people who probably will just want a nicer Civic, and the Integra will be that for those people. And for those people, you get a little bit more of a power bump over a normal, Civic Sport Touring or something like that, so I could see there being some appeal here for those people potentially. And now it's also worth noting, there's no talk yet of a Type S or Type R model. Hopefully something like that will come down the road and fulfill, some of those performance desires that people have been having. But you also have to keep in mind, I'll say this one last time, I've said this back, the past few times I've covered the Integra. The Integra was always a nicer Civic. Anyone who was expecting anything other than a nicer Civic was setting themselves up for disappointment from the beginning. It was always going to be a nicer Civic. Yes, a few more horsepower would have been nice, but I was fully kind of expecting just Civic mechanicals in a nicer skin with a hatch, and that's basically what we got here. Sure, I'd love it to be 300 horsepower, two-door coupe for $25,000, but that's just not realistic these days. So we'll see how this ends up going. I mean, sales are the ultimate, decider of, what is, successful and what isn't really. So we'll see how it sells. By the way, if you are interested in one of these, you're going to be able to pre-order them now, and they'll be in dealers here this spring. So coming very quickly. I'm hoping to, be able to do a review on one here in a few months and, give you guys my thoughts on it. But, from a performance standpoint, obviously it's going to probably be slower than a Civic Si since it's heavier. So yeah, we'll see. I'm sure many of you will leave me your comments below as far as what you think about the Integra, and I'm sure you won't mince words either. So, but anyway, very interesting to see that finally. For some more controversial news for enthusiasts here, Chevy this week has teased a new SS version of the 2024 Blazer that was going to be all electric. So, all we see here is a sporty looking wheel and a motorized charging port door, and they say it's going to be revealed later this year and actually be going on sale in the spring of 2023, so we're only a year away from this brand new next generation electric Blazer, which is surprising. But yes, so Chevy is now planning to use the SS badge for performance EV models. And so I'm sure there'll be a non-Blazer SS, so regular Blazer electric, but the SS will be a faster version, I'm guessing. And so, yes, we are entering the era of GM where SS will now stand for a faster electric vehicle. Not the Blazer SS everyone was hoping for, I know. But yes, that is the way they're going with this. But hey, at least they're not calling it a Camaro, right? So they're still one step ahead of Ford in my mind as far as, at least respecting names a tiny bit more, although the Blazer obviously should still be, some type of truck-based thing. But regardless, anyway, very interesting to see that. That was kind of an unexpected thing here to have the SS here on an electric car. But an EV that might be getting a warmer welcome here this week is the Volkswagen ID Buzz, which we finally see fully revealed here in its production form, and it's wonderfully faithful to the retro modern concept with the fun two-tone paint colors here. There's very boxy styling, and it just looks really cool in my opinion. The only bad news here is that we won't be getting it in the States until 2024. So we're still 2 years away from seeing this thing in the streets here. And that is going to be when the longer 3-row version arrives, which is what we'll be getting here in the States. This shorter wheelbase one, won't be coming here, but it will be in Europe. And Europe is also going to get the longer one as well. But this shorter 2-row version you're seeing is just for Europe. And it should be arriving in Europe here this year, actually. On the inside, you can see that it's basically just as fun as the outside. Lots of colors. colors, you know, some interesting trim and stuff there, lots of space, of course. It does unfortunately use the new Volkswagen infotainment system though, and seems to run the same tiny gauge pod screen the ID4 uses as well. Mechanically, it's the same as the ID4 again, since it's on the same platform, running the same motor. So that means you get 201 horsepower and rear-wheel drive as standard. So very faithful to the original Volkswagen bus, honestly. And it runs an 82 kilowatt hour battery that does 170 kilowatt fast charging. And then the dual motor all-wheel drive setup you can get in the ID4 will most likely show up in the Buzz here at some point too, and that will give you 302 horsepower and all-wheel drive. But they haven't announced any availability for that yet. But it would make sense, especially here in the States where we're a little more power hungry, to offer that here. The only other thing that's unfortunate is the cargo van version you're seeing there, which is also really cool. That is only for Europe as well. So we're not getting the cargo version here, which is definitely a bummer. But anyway, if you're in Europe though, all these versions will be arriving in the third quarter of this year to be exact. And the long wheelbase one for the US will be a 2025 model year vehicle when it does arrive at some point here in 2024. So very interesting to see that. And the last big debut this week is the 2023 Mazda CX-60, which is the first Mazda to get this new rear-wheel drive based platform with longitudinal engines, and this is also a plug-in hybrid setup. It's the first for Mazda for that as well. Before you get too excited though, this model won't be coming to the US. Instead, we'll be getting a CX-70 that's going to be pretty similar, but it's rumored to be wider. Basically expected to kind of have the same kind of body treatment you see on the new CX-50. I would just expect to see this CX-60 with the fender flares from the CX-50, and that'll probably be our CX-70. I could be wrong, but that's just my guess as far as, you know, what they're going to change. But it could be something more unique as well. We'll see. But anyway, with this vehicle not being as wide as potentially the one we'll get here in the States, the CX-60 is still a couple inches wider than a CX-5 and about 7 inches longer as well. So definitely, you know, a larger vehicle. And there's some big mechanical improvements, though, for Mazda in general with this new platform, thanks to its extra length. But I mean, lots of new technology improvements and stuff. So first off, the mechanicals here. At launch, the only powertrain available is going to be the same 2.5 liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder from other Mazdas, but it's just mounted longitudinally now. But that gets paired up with a 134 electric motor for a total of 323 horsepower and 368 pound-feet of torque, which they say actually officially makes it the most powerful production car Mazda has ever made, which I'm kind of surprised. For some reason, I thought that like RX-7s made more power, but I think they kind of all were that 297 or whatever that was agreed to back then. So this is officially the most powerful thing they've ever made. 0 to 60 time is quoted at 5.8 seconds. And even though it's a plug-in hybrid, it runs power through a new 8-speed automatic transmission as well. So I didn't see any details on that 8-speed automatic, whether that is something that is shared with another company or who makes the transmission. So we'll have to get more details on that down the road. But very cool to see they're going beyond 6 speeds finally. It also uses a 17.8 kilowatt hour battery that Mazda claims will do 39 miles of electric range on the easier WLTP testing cycle. And if you're not into plug-in hybrids, Mazda will also offer 2 new straight 6-cylinder engines as well, at least in Europe, you know, where this vehicle debuted. So one is a naturally aspirated 3-liter Skyactiv X setup, and the other is a turboed 3.3-liter diesel. The diesel one, it seems fairly likely won't be coming to the States here, but the gas one, you know, could show up in the CX-70. And so Mazda hasn't given any specs for these engines, but they say that the gas 6-cylinder is as efficient as their 4-cylinder, amazingly. I'm not sure. I guess the Skyactiv X technology is what helped them to do that, but very impressive if that's the case. These engines will also be offered with rear-wheel drive as standard, with all-wheel drive being optional. But if you go for the plug-in hybrid one, that will have all-wheel drive as standard, of course, because the electric motors, I believe, are up front there. And these new Mazdas should handle pretty well too, because they're now running a double wishbone front suspension, along with having a multi-link independent rear. The interior also gets lots of great improvements here, with nicer materials and switchgear. There's big fully digital gauges, a bigger 12.3-inch screen that seems to still only be using a controller wheel and not having touchscreen functionality. At least that's the way it seems. The screen does look like it's closer to the driver than other Mazdas though, so maybe there's hope that there's touchscreen available as well. I don't know, but one improvement here is that it does have smartphone integration, that wireless smartphone integration now as standard, so you don't have to plug your phone in anymore for CarPlay and Android Auto. So good that it has that. And so the CX-60 will be arriving at European dealers this year, and Mazda has said that the new CX-90 on this platform, which will be a 3-row, will be coming to the US next year and will most likely replace the CX-9. But they didn't say anything about a CX-70, so I'm guessing that means that that model should be arriving in the US sometime later this year, but they've been silent on it so far. So we'll see, how long we have to wait for that. But still, huge improvements. What other car company with one car comes out with a brand new platform that changes the mounting of the engines, that comes out with 2 other new engines, plus a new plug-in hybrid setup, and a completely new suspension design, and a new transmission? This is just like, they're just throwing everything at this thing with all these brand new things. Very exciting, and I'm very excited for this new direction for Mazda. There's no pricing for this CX-60 or, of course, for the other future models coming to the States, but that is the thing. With all these nicer improvements, it's going to be more expensive, with Mazda pushing up market to try and be like an entry-level luxury brand. So be prepared for these things to be pricey, but they're going to be very nice, it seems, and so very cool to see that. 2 cars that were actually confirmed to be revealed this year are the new BMW M2 and the lightweight M4 variant. That will probably be the CSL, but we're not sure yet as far as what that's actually going to be called. But BMW's North American CEO confirmed the arrival of both models this year, and we don't have any other info beyond what we've seen in spy shots in the past. But it's just great to know that there's a new M2 coming this year that's should drive very, very well, and so great to hear that those 2 are coming. We also have some exciting rumors here about a future Lexus, and actually 2 future Lexus performance models that are supposedly coming. So Japanese magazine Best Car claims to have anonymous insiders telling them that Lexus is working on 2 sports cars. The rumors say that the first one will be arriving sometime around 2025 and will run a twin-turbo 4-liter V8 combined with some type of hybrid setup to potentially run about 700 horsepower is what they're claiming. Now, if this sounds familiar, we've been hearing about a twin-turbo V8 in the works at Toyota and Lexus for several years now. It was rumored for an LCF that was going to be happening, and we heard about that years ago. There's also talks that this motor was going to show up in the next generation of the Lexus LX, which we know, since we see the new LX 600, that's just running, twin-turbo V6 instead. So, take that one with a grain of salt, but supposedly, we have some new rumors here that this is actually something that's moving forward, that they aren't done with V8s, maybe naturally aspirated V8s, but not with this turbo one. So I'm glad to hear that maybe that engine's still, being developed somewhere in a bunker and Lexus headquarters or something. So that's exciting. They also said it's not going to be super rare. They're saying, according to this report, it'll be on the same TNGA-L platform as the LC and be a regular production model. So it kind of sounds like it's just going to be like the LC is getting a next generation version, and it'll finally get a fast version of that as well that uses the motor that the LCF was always supposed to get. We'll see, if that turns out to be what it is or not. Now, as far as how it's going to look, Best Car claims the styling will be similar to the electrified Sport, which is interesting because that model, everyone assumed would be electric, but was called electrified. So, if it has this hybrid thing, then it very well could, be electrified. It would be very gorgeous, of course, if it ends up looking like that concept even a little bit. And then they say the second sports car that's coming that will be fully electric for Lexus, that won't be coming until at least 2030, according to Best Car. That sounds really far out. But, I guess if they want to give 5 years for this new LC thing or whatever to, have its fun and then have this other thing later. But just kind of surprising because based on, all this electric plans that Toyota recently announced and stuff, I was assuming, the next sports car from Lexus would be fully electric. But, maybe, they're going to hang on to the gas thing a little while longer, which, hey, I'm not complaining. But so interesting to hear that. And also don't forget, I just talked about recently how Toyota's working on another sports car that's going to be a GT3 race car first that they will then, of course, have to make a production version of. And there's talks that could be the new Lexus RC. So there could be potentially 3 new Lexus 2-door sports cars in the works, which, I got to commend them for their bravery with how few 2-doors are sold these days. No one can claim that Toyota and Lexus do not have an enthusiast heart to them with all these sports cars that they currently sell, all the ones they're working on. I mean, all the racing they do now and everything. I mean, big Toyota fan here with all this stuff. So, I mean, what other car companies working on 3 sports cars simultaneously? It's like unheard of. So, awesome stuff. And and supposedly that GT3 race car thing, Best Car is also mentioning that could come as soon as next year. So we'll see about that, but that would be a pleasant surprise if that comes sooner than we were expecting. Keeping the exciting news going here, we got some more good stuff here. Honda and Sony announced an epic partnership, in my opinion, late last week here to form a new company to sell electric cars. So there was no name revealed yet for this new car company, but this is really huge news because anyone who watches these weekly updates knows that the second that Sony came out with that car, I knew that they were going to build that thing. It was so polished. It looked production ready even a couple years ago when the first car came out, and they were testing it on public roads, and it was way too much work for something that they had no plans to ever build. And Sony kept saying over and over, oh no, we're not building it. Oh, this is just like to test out technologies and stuff. I'm like, who engineers an entire car to test out touchscreens and stuff and, LiDAR stuff? Like, you don't have to do that. No one else does that. I mean, Sony was very humble about it, and I commend them for being modest, but, clearly this, I'm glad that they have actually made this come to reality here. And Honda, I think, is a perfect partner. I'm very excited to see, how this all works out. But I mean, it's basically the perfect solution here because, you have Honda's trying to get into electric cars, of course, as well. But Sony, by working with Honda here, I mean, I'm assuming they'll have Honda dealerships, for servicing, for selling. It's the perfect solution to partner with a big car company, and also you get their expertise as far as manufacturing, their manufacturing facilities. It's just a whole bunch of positives here, and it works out really well for Honda as well because we knew Honda already has a partnership with GM, and the first Honda electric vehicle and the first Acura electric vehicle will both be on GM's Ultium platform. But beyond that, Honda had said that they wanted to do their own unique platform from 2025 on, and so I don't know if that will be the same platform that underpins these Sony cars, or how the plans have now changed with the Sony partnership here, if Honda's going to have a separate EV thing for themselves, or if all Honda EVs will then be under this new Sony umbrella instead, or what the case will be. Obviously, Honda can't build gas-powered cars forever, so I'm assuming Honda will have their own EVs at some point. But it's interesting they're going to have this new sub-brand or whatever here, and so there's no date as far as, when we're going to be even hearing the new name for this company or, any kind of other plans or vehicles or anything like that. So still very early stages here, but very exciting, makes a ton of sense. And I think that both companies will really, profit as a result. So very exciting to see that. Aston Martin this week has also announced their own partnership. So they've partnered up to develop electric vehicle batteries with Britishvolt. And so Aston Martin is aiming to have their first EV out by 2025 and plans to offer electric versions of all its models now by 2026, which is really quick and way faster than a lot of other, supercar and luxury car makers here. So that's, pretty crazy. And so Aston Martin CEO said, working together with Britishvolt, I believe we can create new technologies to power benchmark-setting Aston Martin electric cars that will match our reputation for high performance and ultra luxury with the highest standards of sustainability. So, makes total sense in the current environment and stuff. Obviously, I'm going to miss the awesome sounding Aston Martin engines, especially their V12s. But they did say they're going to keep the V12 on as long as they possibly can until Euro 7 basically forces it to go away, which, could be 2025, 2026, something like that. But they will have other gas-powered stuff. It's not going to be all EVs from 2026 on. But interesting to hear now they're going to have fully electric versions of everything by 2026. So just 4 short years from now, at least according to the plans here. And they're in good company too, because Britishvolt is also developing batteries for Lotus. And so we'll see whether those two companies share components at all, or if they'll have totally separate, unique things. We'll have to see. But speaking of Lotus here, their Type 132 electric SUV will, it's going to be debuting next month or at the end of this month. Probably will get a new name as well. But I just talked about last last week how they had these new teaser images. Looks very exciting and stuff. But this week we have a pretty good look at it thanks to some patent images here that show us all the angles of it. These are Australian patent images that were discovered by Motor One this week. And so it looks completely different than the original patent images that leaked out way back in 2017. Obviously they had to probably update the car, to fit with, a more modern look than back then. But I gotta say, at least the front end looks a lot more classically attractive on that old patent than it does on the new one here. But this new one looks like it's trying to be a Lamborghini Urus or something to me, in my opinion. But, we'll reserve judgment until we see the full thing fully revealed with actual good pictures and stuff. But very interesting to get a little bit of a sneak peek there. Volvo has revealed a light refresh here for the 2023 XC40 Recharge this week. And so the changes are mild here, but basically it gets slightly sharper styling from the C40 up front. So the C40 is the coupe XC40 essentially, and that had a slightly racier look in the front, and now this has that sharper look as well. So it means it gets a new grille and bumper. You also get some new headlights that are a little sharper, and also are now pixel LED headlights, which means they can intelligently dim part of the beam so it doesn't blind oncoming drivers. And that tech will be coming to the States here now thanks to the more advanced headlight laws that were finally just passed through by the NHTSA. So we will now be able to start getting some of these fancier headlights that have been relegated to Europe up until now. And so this Volvo is going to be one of the first to come with those. The XC40 here is going to also be getting some new wheels, colors, and interior materials. You can see there's like a wool that they have there for the seats you can get now. And so Volvo hasn't said when it's going to be arriving in the US or what the updated pricing will be yet, but it shouldn't change too much. It's pretty mild changes there. And the last news story here is that BMW has announced that they're doing their final testing here on the hydrogen iX5 before actually putting it into production by the end of 2022 in limited numbers. And so one cool thing that they mentioned here during this announcement is that during their testing in the extremely northern part of Sweden, they found that this setup actually delivered the same amount of miles of range, even at -4 degrees Fahrenheit, and the same acceleration performance as well, which you can't say about regular electric vehicles. This, still is electric with the components, but it's powered, of course, by the hydrogen. And so BMW is still really confident that hydrogen could be a viable alternative to gas and electric, down the road here. And they say that it offers the locally emission-free mobility of an electric vehicle and the unrestricted everyday usability, including short refueling stops, familiar from models with an internal combustion engine. That all sounds great, and I'm all for hydrogen. It's just a matter of them putting up more hydrogen stations. There's, a handful of them in the country. And so, if BMW and everyone else who's, pushing for the hydrogen stuff, if they can get charging or, refilling stations out there to even match the amount of charging stations that are out there, which people already complain about, there's not enough chargers. Hydrogen is miles behind the charging infrastructure. So, we'll see how the whole hydrogen thing goes. I really hope that some breakthrough happens so that there's a ton of hydrogen stations all over the place at some point. It'd be great to give people the choice if they want that faster, refill time, or for, apartment dwellers and stuff like that. Hydrogen could make a lot more sense. We'll see, what happens with the infrastructure. But in the meantime, interesting that BMW is working on it, and best of luck to them. And they just said it'll be limited production as well. So they're not planning to sell a bunch of these or anything. But, just a few here to try and continue testing this technology and try and get it out in the public a little bit more. So yeah, very interesting to see all that. And for those of you who actually do stay and watch all the way till the end, I also wanted to make one last little announcement here, and that is that I'm now offering memberships here on the channel. So if you're someone who wants to support the channel, support the weekly updates, you can totally go ahead and join. There's a button right there on the video page and also on the channel page. And there's a bunch of cool perks. You'll be able to get some behind the scenes looks at what I'm working on, and more updates on the Bullet and on Beth's car whenever her new car arrives here later this year, and just a little more interaction. And I'm also going to be posting up like my schedule of upcoming reviews. You'll also get priority replies and comments, and also on the live streams. If your name comes up in a live stream, I'll be able to respond right away to that. And so all those types of things. There's also cool little badges and stuff and all that that'll show up in comments, as well as a few other perks. Like I'm going to probably be doing a few little extra write-ups on vehicles after I've posted the video of things that didn't make the cut in the video. And I'm also going to be starting a new tradition where at the end of every weekly update, I'll give a shout out to any new members that joined in that week. And if there isn't any new members that week, then I'll give a shout out to a random member that is a current member here of the channel here, just to thank you and show my appreciation for your support of the channel. So wanted to make that available to you. Clearly, there are much better causes to support in the world right now. There's war going on. There's high gas prices. Lots of other things that are more worth your money. But, you know, if you want to support the channel, it very much would be appreciated. And just wanted to, you know, open that up for those who wanted to do that. So anyway, that's it for all the news this week, guys. Let me know your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.